If you think knitting is just about cozy sweaters and autumn vibes, these books will change your mind. They prove that knitting is tied to empires, to global economies, to survival, even to space travel. Here are 10 books that completely changed how I see knitting. Let's dive in with Vanishing Fleece. In this book, Clara Parks follows one bale of hay from sheep to skein. Starting at Catskill Merino in upstate New York, she follows it all the way through cleaning and processing to show exactly what goes into making your yarn that you knit with today. I actually talked a little bit about Catskill Merino and this book in my previous video on 10 ethical yarn brands that I love to support, so check it out if you missed it. In this story, Clara turns the fleece into a character itself, and this becomes kind of like a fun road trip novel across the country. It's a really fun read because Clara is so funny and so clearly passionate about wool. This book will give you a new appreciation for the yarn that you knit with and the journey it had to take to get from the sheep into your hands. Next up is This Golden Fleece by Esther Rutter. In this book, Esther quits her job and spends a year traveling across Britain and learning about the different knitting traditions in each place that she visits. As she travels, she knits different projects to match the area she's traveling to. So lace in Shetland, Ganseys in Whitby, a baby blanket in Wales. As she's traveling, she's knitting, and as she's knitting, she's talking and learning about the tradition of that knitted project that she's working on. Throughout the book, you'll learn about wool and its history in Britain, knitting and its history in Britain, and the impact of both on the people that live there. It also kind of reads like the ultimate knitting vlog, where she documents each of her projects, talks through the difficulties that she has, and explains the outcome. This book demonstrates the deep knitting tradition across Britain and how it brings so many communities together. Next on our list is The Shepherd's Life by James Rebanks. And if our previous two books talked a little bit about wool and how it gets to our hands and the projects we knit and their history, this book talks about the experience of being a shepherd and what daily life looks like on a sheep farm. This book covers 1 year in the life of James, who is from a long lineage of shepherds. This book is hyper aware of the fact that fewer and fewer people are living a rural life today. And James reflects on this fact as he moves through his year as a shepherd and reflects on generations that came before him and completed these same tasks year after year. This book gives you a beautiful look at how intertwined the shepherd, his sheep, and the land they live on all become. These 3 books give us a beautiful understanding of how our modern day knitting experience came to be. This next book is going to show us all that came before it. A History of Hand Knitting by Richard Rutt is probably still the most comprehensive hand knitting history we have available to us. It was published in 1987. Rutt, super interesting guy on his own. He was a monk. He just would get like hyper fixated on a topic, learn everything there was to know about it, and put together a book on it. And that's how we have this history of hand knitting. If you are a knitter who loves history, you will absolutely love this book. It is comprehensive. It covers a global history. Rutt really combed through every documentation he could find, paintings, to put together the most full and rich history he could find for our craft. When Richard Rutt wrote this book, he basically set the standard for academics to view knitting as a respectable historical tradition and something worth studying. Knowledge and resources that he shared in this book have really set the stage for future historians to continue to study knitting. This book can run a pretty penny in the used resale market online, but I was able to check this out in my local library for free. I also found a full text online for free, so hopefully it can fit everyone's budget to check this one out. It's an excellent read. Richard Rutt's book is a global history of knitting. It covers everything, but No Idle Hands, A Social History of American Knitting by Macdonald really narrows the focus to just an American history of knitting. And as you can see, it's a chunky one. My favorite thing about this book is that it is a social history of knitting. So it gives you the history, but it also gives you kind of the interpersonal elements behind it. It tells a little bit more of a personal story. And yes, I find the history interesting in itself, but I find the social history the most interesting part. Like, why did people do the things they did and act the way they acted? And what were they trying to communicate to the world through their actions? And how does knitting play a role in that? Fascinating. And Macdonald pulls tons of information from ads, from letters, from diary entries to pull together a social commentary on how knitting shaped identity throughout American history. Knitting has always been about more than just a craft. It's been about morale, it's been about community, it's been about survival. That all plays out in this book, and some of the information that I used in this knitting history video came from this book. So the first 5 books on our list really focused on knitting, yarn, sheep, and how the craft gets into our hands, both historically and literally, like how the physical yarn gets into our hands as knitters, but also the legacy that brought us here. But the next 5 books on our list are really gonna widen the focus and look more at textile history globally and over time and how that impacts our knitting today. The Subversive Stitch by Rozsika Parker was a really important book in changing how the public views embroidery. Rozsika explores the craft of embroidery and talks about how, instead of being defined as fine art, embroidery was marginalized as women's craft. This book proves that textiles can serve as more than just a decorative item. They can serve as protest. They can give folks a voice. From suffragette banners to decorative samplers, this book redefines what embroidery has meant for centuries. The thesis of this book can help us to understand embroidery in an entirely new way, but that understanding can also transfer over to knitting. Women's Work, The First 20,000 Years by Elizabeth Barber, is a comprehensive history of textile creation, especially in the hands of women. And Elizabeth Barber is an archaeologist from Occidental University who studies the textile fragments that still exist under a microscope to create the stories and understanding that she places in this book. Barber goes all the way to the beginning of humanity to prove that textiles were key to human development over time. And she also shows the role that women played in their society. Not always a role of power, but how textiles enabled them to feel powerful and have identity even thousands and thousands of years ago. This book completely demolishes the idea that textile work was secondary in human life and shows that it was key to our development and survival throughout history. And it also shows the importance that women had in society going back to the very beginning. I think it's absolutely incredible the level of skill it must take to investigate each of these textile fragments and build incredible storytelling out of them to help us understand the ancient world and how women were able to create textiles that transformed their families and their communities. Now, if women's work felt a little bit heavy, a little academic for you, I hear you. The Golden Thread is going to be like a beach read in comparison. Each chapter tells a story about a different textile, from Queen Elizabeth's robes to the first NASA spacesuits. Not only is it super readable, it makes each garment, it makes the yarn and the threads and the fabric that makes up those garments feel like an epic element of a story. It feels super exciting every time you come upon a new chapter and get to discover the importance of the garment within it. If you're more of a reader in STEM, you might like The Fabric of Civilization by Virginia Postrel. This book focuses on the economic and technological history of textiles, and it goes almost as far back in history as the previous few, but this one really focuses on the economies of society and how textiles played into them. If you're curious about spinning technology, dye chemistry, trading systems, you will love this book. If women's work talked about textiles and how they literally helped us survive, The Fabric of Civilization helps us to understand how the systems we have in place as far as technology and math were derived from textiles and couldn't have happened without them. The final book on my main list, and I do have 3 bonus books, so stay tuned. The Case for Working with Your Hands, or Why Office Work is Bad for Us and Fixing Things Feels Good, is not the title that is printed on this book, because that's the title of the British edition, and it's a much better title than this title, so we're going to use that one. But if you want the American edition, it's called Shop Class as Soulcraft, an Inquiry into the Value of Work. I am obsessed with this book. I have given away so many copies of this book and ordered another one for myself because it is a must to have on my bookshelf at all times. And I initially bought this book when I was working an office job and trying to understand why knitting gave me joy and my office job did not. Matthew Crawford is a philosophy professor who quit his job to become a motorcycle mechanic, and this book is an inquiry into why he felt so much more fulfilled fixing things with his hands than thinking in an office with his brain. Not to say that thinking is bad, just we know as crafters that making things with your hands is really satisfying. And Matthew Crawford delves a lot into the social element of why we value mental work like office work and we don't value manual labor nearly as much. He looks at the Industrial Revolution and talks about how educated folks had tutors at home, but non-educated and poorer folks had to work in factories. And he sees that as the split when we started to devalue handwork and value thinking work more. He also provides a philosophical exploration of why handwork feels good in our bodies and in our minds, and he uses his experience repairing motorcycles to help explain that. I think this is a great book to help us understand why knitting can seem so devalued in society today. Now, those were my main 10 books, but I couldn't stop there because there were 3 that I felt the need to include, even though I said it was 10 items on my list. So if you want to, stick around for 3 more books. Threads of Life by Claire Hunter is an exploration of fabric and textile history. She talks about suffragette banners, AIDS quilt panels, prison embroidery, and how they all connect to empowerment and history and memory being documented in fabric. This book defines fabric as a place that can carry resistance and memory. It demonstrates that textile work can be an act of resistance and empowerment. This book documents textiles as survival. And like the earlier books on the list, yes, they documented textiles as literal ancient survival. This is more about emotional, philosophical survival. Valkyrie's Loom by Michèle Smith is all about the history of Viking textile work. And I learned from a commenter about this book. I haven't gotten the chance to read the whole thing yet, but that comment piqued my interest enough to include it on this list. That commenter mentioned that Viking weaving was seen as so secretive and so special and so sequestered that men were even scared to enter the space where it happened because they thought it was a kind of witchcraft. And in that line alone, I was sold. This book documents how Viking society built their economy around cloth. Cloth was currency, it was dowries, it was wealth. This is work that I haven't seen represented as often in some of the histories that I mentioned earlier, and so it's a really interesting one I can't wait to read. The final book on our list is Empires of Cotton, and this is a heavy one. This book tackles the history of cotton globally, from industrialization to global trade to slavery. Even while we celebrate textile history, we also have to come to terms with the violent and oppressive history that comes along with it. And this book does a great job of telling all of those parts of the story. This book is a sobering but interesting read, and it helps us to understand our making and our crafting within a global textile history. Those are 10, well, really 13, books that will change the way you view knitting forever. And by the way, I was able to find all of them at my local library, so I'm hoping that they will be accessible and easy to read for you. And with that being said, let me know down below if any of them stood out as a must-read or which one you want to try first. And if I missed any that you think should be on the list, definitely let me know in the comments. As always, it was really fun to talk about knitting with you today, and I can't wait to see you in the next one. Bye!